Welcome to the Second Plan A podcast, where we dive deep into the art of navigating life's twists, turns, and sucker punches. I'm Amber Hoover. I'd rather stick to the plan.
And I am Ryan Hoover, and it's not the plan, it's the planning.
So today we are moving on to our Second Plan A. On this episode, we are taking ownership of our attention span and attempting to dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge the dings, pings, and doom scrolls that steal away our lives. I'd ask if you're ready, but it doesn't matter because you're the one who's going to kick off this episode, and then I'm going to chime in like I was just able to relax and, improv a conversation off of your statements. So what I'd like you to discuss is the Hard Ready program meal plan and the approach it uses for building sustainable nutrition.
Okay, so level 1, Hard Ready, it's about kind of taking on habits, dealing with some emotional toughness, things like that. And then the nutrition plan, the sustainable piece of it, kind of starts from the perspective of we're not going to do what most diets, for lack of a better term, kind of do. So it's a 12-week program. The first 8 weeks or so are mostly about addition instead of subtraction, which is, counter to most approaches to this. The first 2 weeks, it's literally just take a consumption journal, a diet journal. Mm-hmm. Everything that you consume, everything that you eat, everything that you drink throughout the day, every day for 2 weeks, just write it down. And this is kind of the first stage of starting to look at and tackle habits, because what we find is a lot of times people are eating things or drinking things throughout the day without even really realizing it.
Right.
It becomes just part of what they do when they get up and they are watching the news, or they are getting their kids ready for school or whatever, and they're eating this or they're drinking that while that's happening, and over time, it kind of adds up, and it becomes such a part of the routine that you don't even really realize it. So the first 2 weeks are kind of setting that baseline. We ask people to not make any changes, just record them, just write them down. And then after that, for the next 6 weeks or so, it's about adding to what they're eating. So we're still not saying, eliminate
sugars,
starches and sugars and refined foods, and cut back on this, that, or the other. We're not doing that.
Even that language that you just used is more true to the Hard Ready program versus most diets, which are like cut out chocolates and sweets, right, and don't eat after 7 o'clock at night. Like, you're still being very nutrition focused.
Yeah.
As opposed to just crash diet.
Right. Well, I mean, again, because it's not just about losing weight, or that's generally what people are looking at when they're talking about changing their nutrition.
That should be almost a side effect.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're looking at habits. Mm-hmm. Taking on things that we habitually, routinely do and may not even know it. And one of the things that we have, honestly, maybe the most readily available control over is what we consume daily.
Right.
This falls into one of the simple, not easy kind of things. It's simple to sit back and look and say, all right, well, I'm eating this and I'm drinking that, and I should just cut those things out. It's much harder to do.
Yeah.
So what we do is, after the 2 weeks of journaling, then we ask participants to start adding 2 protein shakes per day. Whenever they want, most people probably put them on a time schedule of some sort, but it doesn't matter to me. I want them to add 2 protein shakes a day, and they do that for the next 2 weeks.
It doesn't replace a meal, right? This is in addition. Whatever you're eating, just add. Okay.
We're not taking away anything. And then the following 2 weeks, they're still doing the additional 2 protein shakes a day. The following 2 weeks, they're going to add at least two vegetable servings a day. So if they were already getting 6 vegetable servings a day, they're getting 8 now.
All right.
And so they've got their protein shakes and they've got their new vegetable servings. The following 2 weeks, they're still doing the protein shakes, they're still doing the vegetables the following 2 weeks. Now we're going to make sure that every meal, however we define that, every meal also has a protein serving.
Okay.
So now we're 8 weeks into the program, and the hope is by this point we are getting some subtraction through addition. We are adding good things and removing room or space for things that are maybe less desirable. So by taking on the added nutritional benefits of new things, hopefully not having room, not being able to, because you're full.
Right.
Consume things that maybe are less desirable. You're not snacking in the same way you were before, that kind of stuff. So it's almost by adding good, wholesome foods and food substances, we're kind of eliminating, starving, if you will, the space for things that maybe we shouldn't eat. But it's a different approach than saying don't eat this, don't drink that, because you can almost guarantee that's what you're going to think about for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, there's statistics that show that.
I'm not surprised. You know, we started this program, I don't know, 15 years ago or so, with pretty good success. People kind of wholesale life change stuff. And again, it's about tackling habits and dealing with expectations. And we're starting the habit thing by tackling, again, the thing that's probably most within our control, but maybe not all that easy to do. And I think it's harder to do because, one, we've been told a lot of wrong ways of dealing with poor nutrition or bad nutrition.
Yeah. And still are.
Yeah. Oh, social media is full of ridiculous. And even if there's some good information or good ideas out there, the way of getting people to respond to them is still usually poorly done. Again, if I say, all right, for the next 2 weeks, you're going to eliminate all white sugar from your diet.
Ugh.
Well, first of all, you're probably going to have to spend several days just figuring out what that is and what that means and what it's an ingredient in and whatever.
Right.
And then you're going to start, in that process, you're going to start thinking, oh my God, I can't have anything.
This is so difficult. Yeah.
you know, like there's nothing. Yeah. So instead of that, again, the hope is we add, and we get subtraction through that addition.
And as you get good at eating the good things, it's going to be easier from then on too to look more finely at the.
Well, now we're building better habits, new habits.
Yeah.
You know, again, not by telling people things that they can't do or shouldn't do, by telling people things that they can do, and the ultimate result, hopefully, of that is that they start feeling better. You know, usually by 6-7 weeks in, people are starting to feel the difference. You know, maybe they don't see a difference necessarily yet, but they start to feel the difference. Better energy levels, more clarity, more focus, those kinds of things. Because as we're adding these improved kind of foodstuffs, and hopefully removing some of the others without saying it, we start to feel better. But it takes a little bit of time to get that physical kind of reset, you know?
Yeah.
Because your body at first, especially if you're not used to these kinds of foods, your body at first is like, what is happening? Not just your body, your mind, everything.
Yeah. So this podcast actually isn't necessarily about nutrition, although I feel like we definitely could do a whole episode, and maybe we do. We talk about nutrition a lot in different types of diets and why it doesn't make sense for everybody to eat the same and different things like that.
Yeah.
And we are going to tie a lot of what we talk about today back into the diet, nutrition, culture, and especially the structure that you just explained, because I think it's really important because this all comes back to habits, really. So in 2019, Mark Manson posted an article called The Attention Diet, and he set the stage for this by describing how when we transitioned to more office work and a sedentary lifestyle in the 50s and 60s, it led to a fitness culture and focus on nutrition to offset those changes. As we moved from factories and fields to more desk work, health problems came up. And as a society, the realization was that we need to keep our bodies challenged so they don't become weak. We live in that space.
Yeah.
So he then argues that we have an attention economy now. And what we've created now calls for an attention diet. And so when he phrased it that way, I connected it more towards what I had experienced with you in the Hard Ready plan in terms of what diet meant. And he went on in his article and, of course, made good points. I'm definitely not here to harp on his article, but he talked about consuming less junk media like you would consume less junk in nutrition.
Sure.
But again, we know diets have something like a 95% fail rate in the long run. The majority of them focus on banning things and they don't work and they don't stick to it. So I thought, well, what if we had an attention diet of sorts that looked more like what we do in the Hard Ready program? Rather than just consuming less or cutting out junk, we look to get subtraction by addition, look to consume more of the good as an idea.
Well, we do in Hard Ready Level 2.
Oh.
You start your day with 15 minutes of reading, and you end your night with 15 minutes of reading. Again, with the idea being, we're creating habits. But think about it like this. If you wake up in the morning and the first thing you do is turn on the news, for example.
Ugh.
And so for the 15, 20 minutes you're getting ready, you're inundated with what almost for sure is all bad news, because that's what the news tends to be.
Yep.
And so that sets the tone for the rest of your day. The first thing you are consuming when you wake up is negative information. And maybe you're getting it by scrolling Instagram or scrolling Facebook or, going to Twitter or whatever. And so you're setting the tone for the rest of your day by consuming information that is making you
anxious,
feel a certain way.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, all right, well, I'm going to wake up and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read 15 minutes of Mark Manson's latest book or whatever it is, maybe Seth or whoever, it doesn't matter. Some Tim Grover or some whatever. Yeah. I'm going to read 15 minutes of something that is going to feed my brain positive information, a different way of starting my day. And then similarly at night, well, if the last 15 minutes before I try to go to sleep is me doom scrolling or me watching, the news or whatever.
Yeah.
Then, okay, so now I'm trying to sleep, I'm trying to rest, I'm trying to recharge while I've got all this garbage on my brain. It's garbage in, garbage out. And so if you look at media consumption the same way you look at food consumption, if I consume foods that are 80% clean, okay, just as a baseline, and we try to follow about that 80-20 rule. 80% clean, then my body, my brain, my overall well-being should reflect that. Well, it's going to be the same in consumption through reading or viewership or whatever. If 80% of my consumption is negative or is somehow not supporting a healthy existence, a healthy lifestyle, then that's going to be reflected in the way I feel, the way I act towards other people, my engagements with, strangers, my engagements with people that are familiar. And then you start to see relationships suffer and whatever else, because everything I'm consuming or the bulk of what I'm consuming is negative. Well, it's going to be really hard to have a positive outlook if 80% of what you put into your brain is negative. And so starting the day with 15 minutes of something positive, and then ending the day with 15 minutes of something positive, I think is a great way to kind of bookend the day. You start it off hopefully relatively well, and then you end it similarly. And if the last thing that I consume of the day is something that, and look, it doesn't even have to be like,
it could be science fiction.
Yeah.
It could be,
as long as it's not something that is going to shed a negative light on my view of the world or the people closest to me or whatever.
Right.
It can be a novel. Who cares? That's okay. I think starting your day with something a little bit more substantive, probably. But ending your day, read, David Baldacci or something.
I like how for phase 2, I guess, of Hard Ready, you chose to put them at the beginning and the end of your day. One, in terms of setting the tone and then choosing how you end your day. But also because one of the hardest things about establishing new habits is there's going to be some loss to build that new habit.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the I hate to use even the word easiest, one way to build a new habit is to put it with an already existing habit. You're going to wake up. Yep. You're going to go to sleep.
Yep.
I would say the large majority of us, the bulk of your time, you get to control those things. And, even if you have to wake up 15 minutes earlier, we're not talking about an hour and a half earlier and getting your gym clothes ready and having it just a little bit earlier so you get some reading time in, and then end of the night, read before you turn out the light kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, it can even be you throw on an audio book while you're taking a shower or while you're getting ready or whatever. If you legitimately cannot, at least in this moment in time, figure out how to read for 15 minutes, okay, well, let's consume it in a different way. I think it's too easy to find excuses for not doing the things that we know. Here's the truth. Here's the reality. And this is going to be true of most types of habits and most types of consumptions. Generally speaking, we all know what we should do and what we shouldn't do.
Yes.
So it's not about not knowing or not.
Oh, no.
Obviously, like, maybe we could be better educated on nutrition. But generally speaking, you know not to wake up and every day have a Pop-Tart. Like, you're a grown-ass adult. You do not wake up and have a Pop-Tart.
No, I don't.
I fix your breakfast.
I did not ever wake up and just eat a Pop-Tart as an adult. I promise. I don't think. No, but you're right. So,
I know.
There was an article in Psychology Today talking about weight loss attempts and that sort of things. And changing behavior is just not easy. If it were straightforward, you would have done it already. There's a difference between knowing the theory and being able to put it into practice. And the gap between that is your psychology, beliefs, outlook, emotions, all of these things that go into decision making, which is why we'd rather have habits that guide us so that it's less, a habit is something that's done without really thinking about it. You just kind of go on towards it.
For better or worse.
Right. I want to go back to the start of phase 1 for Hard Ready nutrition plan, which you said was 2 weeks of just journaling.
Yep.
And that's very much we can't know where we're going until we know where we are kind of thing, right?
Yes.
I think that's what's missing from a lot of attention diet culture. There's just watch less bad things.
Right.
Take more control over what you watch. It's like
saying situational awareness.
I was just going to say,
it doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything.
It
doesn't give you direction. It doesn't give you actionable things to do. It's just a buzz term. Throw a hash brown on it, send it to the internet. We're good to go.
Yep.
You need to have an idea of where you are to know what kind of changes you need to make.
Yeah.
And I do think that would be pretty challenging for media intake, but it's an important step to actually know if I am doing a better job at what takes my time and attention.
Right. Well, I mean, my iPhone at the end of every week tells me exactly how much time I'm spending on whatever apps happen to be on my phone.
That's true. We have the technology.
I don't even ask it to do that. I would rather it not do that sometimes. but it does it, you know. And if I want to do something with that information, it's readily available to me. And so if I know at the end of the week that that little thing pops up and it says that I was spending 27% more time online last week than I was the week before, that's probably something that I should take a look at. Now, maybe there was some very valid reason for that, or maybe it was just, you know, I'm getting lost in the shuffle and I'm sitting there just scrolling around mindlessly, and that's something that I have 100% control over.
Yeah,
you know, and so if it takes me saying, all right, well, I am going to, from this time to this time, I'm going to consume this sort of information. I'm going to read this book, you know, whatever it is. And I'm only going to go on social media between this time and this time. Well, that's a way for me to start taking control over what I'm doing with my time and what my habits are. Because it just like picking up the Doritos that you didn't remember eating, you know, while you were on a conference call or a Zoom call or whatever, and you turned your video off so nobody could see you eating your
that
Doritos.
microphone.
Yeah, it's the same with media consumption. You know, I don't realize how much time I'm spending scrolling through and watching these dance videos that all of a sudden I've become enthralled with. You know,
they're good.
They are.
That's why they're getting sent to you and pushed to you. That,
and that's the thing. And, you know, we've talked about that in previous kind of iterations. Every time I click on whatever, I'm going to see more of that whatever, you know, and then it just becomes this kind of self-fulfilling thing where it's just going to avalanche. And the thing that I'm drawn to is going to be constantly fed to me. And now I really don't have to think about it because I don't even have to go out searching for it anymore.
No, they just drop it right in front of you.
Right there.
I don't want to spend too much time just looking at like hacks in this podcast. They're all over the internet. Again, we have the information. It would be one thing if this was the 70s and we were like, I don't really know what foods are good for me. And you don't have that information readily available. But we all know the answers or know how to find the answers right now. But it's important to realize that it's a process. All of a sudden, you're not going to wake up one day, probably. Some people go cold turkey on diets, but and maybe they keep them for the rest of their lives.
That would be me.
But for the rest of us, it's a steady overtime progression, just like with Hard Ready. If you just one day are like, I'm not going to use Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or anything, you'll probably forget how to get information, honestly.
Well, you won't do it.
And you won't do it. That's
you'll last a day or two.
Yeah.
That's why I said, you know, set a time. I'm not saying don't go to Facebook, don't go to Instagram, don't go to Twitter, don't go to TikTok, don't go to whatever. I'm saying if I'm spending 3 hours a day on these apps, then I'm going to allot myself an hour, let's say.
Yeah.
And it's going to be between this time and this time. And that's it. Yeah. You know, I'm not saying don't do them. I'm saying be more intentional about it.
Right.
That way it's much harder for it to kind of get away from me.
So for me, a lot of my work requires me to be on the social media channels, and it's not very easy to script because I'm lucky enough that I get to set my own schedule. It's not every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday at 2 p.m. I'm on socials posting and that sort of thing. It's all over the place. Mm-hmm. And for a while, I let that be an excuse, really, until I started learning how, for me, what I needed to do to control my intake. And what I started doing is when I got comfortable with where my social apps were on my phone, I moved them. Mm-hmm. And it's not that like, oh, now I can't find them because I know how to hit the search button. Like there are things I can do, but it took me out of that trance of sometimes I'm waiting on a website to load and I'm bored and I just click, go. Mm-hmm. And so when I would go click, wait, that's not right. Where is it? Wait, what am I doing right now? It gave me a chance to reflect. Right. Because again, habits you do without thinking about. If I'm just constantly going to Instagram, not thinking about it, it's going to be really hard to affect that change. So I need something to alert me, to bring me back to reality. And, and by shifting around my apps, it made me think, wait, what am I doing? Do I actually need to go there? This page is going to load in 5 more seconds. I can sit with this uncomfortability because I want to do something and feel like I'm doing something.
Yeah.
And recognizing, I'm quoting a term from Nir Eyal, who wrote a book called Indistractable, recognizing the internal trigger that led me to want to just jump to that app and start scrolling helps me control it a bit more.
Yeah. Well, I don't know this book. I'm not familiar with it, but you mentioning the title made me think of, I think it's very difficult to be distracted from something that you enjoy, something that you like.
Yeah.
It's very easy to be distracted from something that maybe is less enjoyable, less fun, less interesting, less engaging, whatever. And so there's probably something to that as well, and making a conscious effort to understand, look, I know I'm getting ready to do something that is necessary.
Yeah.
I need to do this, or have to do it, however you want to. And it's not something that I'm super crazy about. It's not the most fun part of my day. And so doing what I can to help focus and stay on task, and maybe consciously remove some distractions, because I know I'm more likely to be distracted in this moment in time. Because again, if it's something that you really like and you really enjoy, the odds of you getting distracted away from that probably considerably less than the odds of you getting distracted away from something that you don't really want to be doing in the first place.
Right. And it could be something that you do like or relates heavily to what you enjoy and what your passion is.
Yeah.
But if that's not the mood you're in right now and you need to do it now, we have to have some way to break that barrier or bridge that gap. He talks a lot about it. You kind of tied into this. So I mentioned mastering the internal triggers, understanding how to deal with that discomfort. He also talks about making time for traction. There's a lot of talk about distraction, and not a lot of talk about what is traction. And he mentions asking the question, well, what did you get distracted from? What were you planning to do? Did you have a plan? Because if you didn't have a plan and you were scrolling Instagram, you can't get distracted if you don't know what you got distracted from.
Yeah.
So, and he's a big proponent of time blocking, and there's tons of things like this out there. Again, if you wanted to go down the rabbit hole of different things, and really it's a try them on, see how it feels, decide if you want to buy it or put it back on the rack kind of stuff, but I need to find what works so I can set up, this is what I'm going to do today.
Yeah.
And that'll help.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the trying it on and see what works kind of thing. I do think it's kind of like nutrition. I don't think there is a one size fits all kind of approach to this. Your way of doing this would be very different than my way of doing this.
Yep.
We process information very differently. We in air quotes plan very differently, and so whatever method you chose to gain traction and to make sure that you were being intentional in your day would be very different than mine would be. And it doesn't mean that one is better or worse or good or bad or whatever. Intent is the ultimate kind of barometer. Am I being intentional with what I'm doing, and am I able to follow through? And I think in that case, it's less about the process and more about the results. Am I actually doing what I set out to do? And so then it doesn't really matter, I don't think, so much how I'm getting to that place or how you're getting to that place. But the conscious effort of thinking through it, this is how I'm going to approach that, this is how I'm going to do that, I do think is important.
That's going to help keep you on track too, in terms of not just did I get this done, but did I efficiently get this done?
Yeah.
Because there are times when I'm writing these outlines that it takes me an hour to do something that should have been 20 minutes.
Right.
But I checked my email and then I remembered I needed to do this thing, and let me just go over there real quick and do this. And then let me go do this. And so it takes not just time away because I'm diverting my focus. Yeah, I know. But
what do you know?
I'm going to buy the book Indistractable. That's what I know. And I am amazingly better than I used to be about this. I know. Can you imagine? But there's a cost to switching tasks as well, because you don't get into what it's mostly referred to as flow in the terms that the professional world uses. But gaining traction. There's no traction to be gained because I'm constantly switching, jumping in, and you can't really put your head down and get into it.
Right. Yeah. Finish a thing.
Yeah. Well.
Before you go into the next thing.
Yes.
And then finish that thing before you go into the next thing. And somebody out there is going to try to tell me differently. I don't think multitasking is real. You know, not on a functioning high level.
No,
you know,
that's not how we work cognitively.
I'm not saying that you can't do multiple things at the same time. I'm saying you can't do them well. And so the idea of, well, I'm gonna work on this, and while this is doing that thing, I'm gonna work on this thing, and then the problem is, if I get too much into this one, I forget about the first one that I was doing, and if I'm trying to bounce back and forth between 2 or 3 or 4 things, I'm not devoting enough attention to any of them to actually be good at them.
Right. Well, and then they'll say, well, I have a really poor attention span. No, you have a great attention span, but you're trying to divide it up over a bunch of different things. Right. And that's just not how we work, how we function. Right. Don't at me.
I didn't say a word. You're saying it all for me.
Most notably, fans, friends, internet. I'm very famous for this with cleaning, because I pass something and I know I'm going to forget it later. And so I'm like, well, this is on my way. And then
I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Well, I'm getting this real quick. Okay, but
nobody's going to see that. We have people coming over to the house and you haven't swept. Like, I know. Consumption or something.
Yeah.
I don't know about all of the actions and the prioritization that needs to happen.
Yeah, that's a thing that maybe you struggle with.
For me, for the internet, for everything.
From time to time. What to prioritize and how to prioritize and following through on that.
Doesn't track. So.
Sounds right.
What other forms of media? Obviously, we're harping on social media, and that is the most readily available to us, typically least informing parts of our consumption.
Yeah.
What other areas are we not noticing that are impacting what we consume in our attention?
I mean, probably there's some personal communication stuff, in terms of, just how many times do you get a text a day, mm-hmm. and think about it like this. If you were working an 8-hour day in 1984, you're going to get 8 hours of probably pretty focused, intentional work. And this is not a judgment on, I'm not saying people in 1984 were harder workers or anything like that.
Right.
It has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
There wasn't the distraction of internet. There wasn't the distraction of, oh, there's an Instagram message, there's a Facebook message, there's a text, there's an email, there's
that constant connection.
Yes. Things that are constantly drawing me away, distracting me from whatever it is that I'm trying to accomplish, I'm trying to do. So I'm kind of inundated with, and it could be good information.
Yeah.
But it's still something that's pulling me away from the thing that I'm trying to do or trying to accomplish. And most of the time it's not good information.
Yeah.
People are texting you throughout the day. It's garbage. And it's
or at the very least not related to what you're supposed to be focusing on. So even if it's great, even if it's good news, even something awesome, if your intent was to focus and get this project done or whatever.
And now I just spend 10 minutes in a text conversation.
Yep. Because while you were there and you responded really quickly, you also noticed you got a different text from somebody else and they sent you a link and you're looking at that, connects to Instagram, and then you're just in this loop. I personally cannot handle little red numbers. So I pretty much have no notifications turned on. I get no banners, no numbers, no anything, no sounds for the majority of my apps. Yeah. I get text messages. There are a couple apps that I care about related to kids or whatever we have going on that I might need them on. But for me, I don't need to go check my Instagram messages. That's never going to be a priority, so I don't need to see that I have one.
Oh, the absolute only notification I get on my phone is text.
Text, yeah.
That's it. And my phone hasn't made a sound in 15 years.
That's awesome. For me, the trade-off here, the idea I think that's important to tie this to for what we're talking about is picking something that we can control that makes the rest of it easier. It's the 80-20 rule again.
Mm-hmm.
I can find a specific little corner of my world to impact that's going to make the biggest ripple effect.
Yeah.
When I went into my settings and found all of my apps that made noises and started turning off notifications, turn off badges, turn off, like, it took me some time.
Right.
But
it pales in comparison to the time that it saved you.
Yes.
Over however many days, weeks, months, years.
The book, The One Thing.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're familiar with it. I, for the life of me, can't think of the author right now.
Yeah, I don't know.
So in The One Thing, they talk about finding.
It's a really good book, though. Check it out.
It's awesome. We'll link it for sure and let you know where you can find it. They talk about finding the one thing I can affect right now that by doing it is going to make everything else easier. And it calls back to prioritization. What's the one thing I can do right now that's going to make other things easier or maybe even obsolete because I did it? Yeah. Well, and if I didn't turn off all my notifications, I would be clicking around all the time to clear those. Because again, I don't know. They drive me nuts.
Yeah.
So at some point I chose, you know what, the one thing I can do right now is make sure those notifications don't even pop up so that I don't have to spend time in the future clearing them out.
Yeah.
And I maybe don't do it enough. When I do get overwhelmed, when I have a lot piling up, I take this prioritization method. It's the one thing I can do right now that by doing it is going to make other things easier. Mm-hmm. And that's how I start whittling down my day and my projects and my tasks.
Yeah. Well, and it's, and I think we've touched on this previously. I'm a big fan of solutions, problem solving, mm-hmm. And so when it comes to, I think, attention and focus and whatever, a lot of times there's a lot of attention, a lot of focus on things that we can't actually solve.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, which leads me to consuming more and more information of things that aren't relevant to what it is that I'm trying to do and trying to accomplish. Because I think whether it's conscious or subconscious, a lot of times we're looking for distractions.
Yes.
We're looking for things to pull us away from that thing that we know we have to do, that we have to get done, that maybe we don't really, either we don't want to do it, or maybe it's a little bit scary or daunting or, whatever it is. And it's going to challenge us, it's going to push us. And I really don't want to touch on that right now. And so again, consciously or subconsciously, I start searching for things to pull me away from it. And that's where, you come up with excuses. Well, I didn't do this because I got tied up doing this other thing.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, you got tied up doing that other thing because
you hit a roadblock, and
you chose to do that. Yeah. Instead of trying to figure out how do I deal with this stop that has hit me, this thing that I've kind of butt my head up against, and we've said it in the past, instead of trying to figure out how to go over, around, under, or through this wall, I'm like,
somebody come move this.
It's a wall. Somebody come get this for me. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go scroll on Instagram real quick.
We do this with nutrition too, to just connect it back to something that is probably more familiar to people. I know I need to eat these vegetables. I know what to consume, and I know I should be doing it, and I know it's good for me. But it's much easier rather than sit here and make this meal. Well, I'm busy. Let me just grab this bag of chips and it'll be fine. We take the easy route because whatever that resistance we feel when something matters, calling back to, again, earlier episodes, that resistance we feel means something matters. It means the stakes are high, and we feel some anxiety towards that probably, and look for this easier path.
Well, and I mean, we are very much a microwave society. Mm-hmm. We want things here, now, done, over with.
The stove is waiting for you when you want to give the microwave a break.
Uh-huh. And it's you can make time for it now, or you can make time for it later. You can either make time now to fix better meals, spend more time shopping for better groceries, or you can make time for it later by visiting the doctors and having to go on meds and so
it's the choose your
heart. Yeah. And again, I understand it's a lot easier said than done, because it's very hard for us as humans to look out 20 years and be like, maybe I'll have to deal with some high blood pressure or cholesterol or whatever, but
it won't be that bad.
Yeah.
Right
now, I can throw this thing in the microwave and, I got all this other stuff I need to do.
Yeah.
Well, all that other stuff you will be better equipped to deal with that based on how you're consuming food, how you're consuming drink, how you're consuming information right now. Your overall wellness, your overall health, is going to be a direct reflection of how you do everything else.
So, and it's interesting, again, tying this back to nutrition, because we know the effects of poor eating habits. We've seen decades-long studies. We've been able to track that. Mass consumption of media is still relatively new. There are some studies, but by and large, we don't really know how that's going to affect us. And we're starting to see studies where at least the American attention span, or within the Anglosphere kind of stuff, the attention span used to be maybe 2.5 minutes, and now it's 45 seconds, or those types of things. But we don't actually know long-term effects. We know what's going to happen if you eat McDonald's twice a day, every day for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going to happen if you spend 3 hours on Instagram every day for the next 20 years.
Well, but you can do a quick experiment of your own right now.
Mm-hmm.
Take the next 7 days, and as soon as you wake up, pick up a book that, let's just go to any sort of self-help genre kind of thing. Pick one. I don't care.
Listen to a podcast, a self-help podcast.
It could be business. It could be, whatever.
Yeah.
Read that for 15 minutes. Do that for a week. See how you feel throughout the day. The following week, first thing you do is go to Twitter and search a hashtag for something that is politically charged. I
was just going to say politics. Yeah. Yeah.
And spend 15 minutes scrolling on that politically charged hashtag, and do that for a week. And then let's see how you feel 1 week to the next, every day. I'd wager that you're going to notice a difference.
Yeah.
In how you feel, in how you make others feel, and how you interact with other people, and how your productivity, because one is going to jumpstart your day.
Yeah.
That 15 minutes is going to jumpstart your day. The other, that 15 minutes is going to derail your day, because it's going to piss you off. It's going to aggravate you. It's going to distract you from things that truly matter. And you're spending 15 minutes on things that you can't actually affect.
Right.
Whereas if I read 15 minutes of Tim Grover's Relentless every day for a week, I'm going to feel like I want to run through walls to get things done.
And I've noticed that in myself in terms of choosing what podcasts I listen to when, choosing even what shows I'm going to watch, because I can tell they have a different effect on me. Yeah. And it's part of why I watch Friends over and over again. I feel different versus when I watch other types of sitcoms. And it's different to the individual.
Sure.
But again, paying attention, having intent with what you're doing, and tracking what you're doing or how you feel goes a long way. William James was looking at this in 1890 when he published The Principles of Psychology, Volume 1. Don't worry. I know you're worried right now that this is going to be a long, very technical quote, but it's going to be very simple and you're going to love it. My experience is what I agree to attend to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's really strong, because there's such a tendency to give up control over your consumption and media and what people are saying to you, what texts are coming in. You are still in control. Your experience is based on what you agree to.
Yeah. Look, I'm going to out somebody, and I won't do it like super publicly, but if people were present, they'll know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
We recently had a training session, and there was a group of 3. And in this group of 3, there was a bit of a disagreement, maybe some agitation, some frustration in the group. And one of the people in the group sort of lashed out in a very loud and obvious way.
Yeah.
We've all been there. We all get it. It's very easy to get frustrated and aggravated, especially in a training environment, especially if you've been training for a lot of hours or whatever.
Sure.
The easiest thing to do is leave the group.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm choosing what I'm going to give attention to. I'm choosing what experience I am going to attend. And the 20,000 foot view says, well, just go to a different group.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I'm giving power to the people that have aggravated me.
Yeah.
Instead of taking the power and taking the control and being like, you know what, I don't need this. And literally just walking over to another group. We saw something similar a few weeks back in a sparring session where, and again, we've all been there, we've all experienced this, where in a kickboxing sparring session, there was this gradual escalation of, I don't want to say retaliation, but it's one person thinks the other person goes a little bit hard, so you go a little bit hard back, and you get this escalation.
Which is interesting because in the reality, what works better is if you go hard scale the other way. All of a sudden, you're barely touching them.
Yeah.
Sometimes, obviously, this is very variable, but
sure. But it's that approach. That approach requires a lot of self-control and insight and introspection.
Again, those internal triggers, being able to manage them.
But what it also does is it is much starker for the other person. If all of a sudden, instead of me dialing it up by 1 or 2, I dial it down by 10, it's like, oh, wait.
Yeah.
What's happening?
Noticeable. Right.
It's noticeable. It's the frog in the boiling water kind of thing, which is not 100% true, but whatever. Everybody understands what I'm talking about.
I think you put a frog in how you boil a frog, you put a frog in water and the heat slowly turns up.
Turn it up and it doesn't notice it and blah, 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 whatever. So in sparring, you get a similar thing. This gradual escalation of physical response. Whereas if I do the opposite and I have this stark de-escalation of physical response, it's much more obvious to the other person, and I think it forces them to recognize that they were getting out of control and that the situation was getting out of control.
Yeah.
And so that my response in that moment in time is wholly up to me.
Yeah.
You know, I choose to escalate or de-escalate. I choose to say, hey, bro, I'm going a little hard there. I'm an adult. Like, why is that a hard conversation to have?
Yeah.
And it's often it's ego. Sometimes it's adrenaline. You're in this adrenalized state, whatever. But as soon as I give into that, I am losing control. And I can't blame the other person.
Mm-mm.
Because if I go hard because they went hard, I'm doing the exact same thing to them instead of recognizing.
Yeah. If they respond the same way, they go hard because you go hard. Yes. Yeah. You just have this escalation rather than a conversation.
Right. And we're in an environment where we're supposed to be growing and improving and getting better. And this person in front of me is supposed to be my training partner, not my opponent. And I mean, you could draw parallels to this in life and work relationships, personal relationships, whatever. Somebody says something that aggravates me, frustrates me, pisses me off, whatever. Instead of me saying something about it, asking them about it, pointing it out to them, maybe I return an insult. I return, and instead of there becoming a conversation where there could be a productive resolution, there's an escalation, and now it just becomes this back and forth where now everybody just ends up pissed at each other.
This takes us back to our conversation on cognitive distortions, that trapped thinking, logical fallacies, episode 8, where we were talking about you're making up a story in your head and not verifying, checking the facts. A lot of the cognitive distortions are things like fortune telling or predicting the future, basically assuming a whole narrative without actually talking to the person. And we do that in a split second. We're very efficient at that, at creating stories and making these things happen in my head. And you haven't even realized, wait, I don't actually know what's going on, what their actual intent is. And rather than having that tough conversation, it's easier to just assume, well, that person's a jerk, or they had it out for me, or.
And I think this is really common when it's the written word, when it's coming through as a text or an email or something like that. I am attaching my emotions to the words, because I can say one thing to you in a certain way, in a certain tone, and you take it a certain way. And I can say the exact same words to you in a different tone, and you take it another way. Well, when it comes through in text, I am choosing as the receiver what tone I am putting on those words. Based on my emotional state in that moment.
Right now, which is almost wholly disconnected from this conversation on what's going on. And to tie it all back to attention, if I'm trying to work on this big project, and especially if there's emotions involved in the project, and I allow that alert, or, me just being too overwhelmed and I try to get distracted with my phone, and I go and I look at this message, I'm coloring it with a lens that's wholly unconnected. It's completely irrational and illogical, yet humans are predictably irrational. And so then we see this text come through, something like sure or fine, not to name anything specific, and we attach our own inflection to it. And now, even if I do okay, I checked that, I said it, we're good, I'm going to go back to this, what's happening in the back of your mind? You're not focused on this anymore.
What did he mean by that?
Why did he say it like that?
Which he didn't say it anyway.
He didn't say it anyway. It was a text. It was 4 letters combined with a punctuation. And that's the situation versus disposition is really hard to extrapolate your friend. That could be a whole nother podcast episode.
Well, but again, it's and I don't want to keep harping on this, but if I start my day with 15 minutes of positive information, and then a text comes through that could be read one way or another, am I more likely to read it in a positive way or less likely? If I start my day with 15 minutes of negative things that I know are going to aggravate me, frustrate me, put me in a more negative mindset, and then that same text comes through, am I more or less likely to read it in a certain way? I think it's obvious, and this isn't foolproof. None of this is 100%, but I'm gaming the system as best I can. I'm setting myself up for the best chance of having a positive, productive experience.
So, and we've spent a lot of time in this episode harping on social media, but it's not necessarily that social media is probably a problem and an evil and we should get rid of it. It has a lot of benefits to it. But, when you invented the car, you also invented car crashes.
No, nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Who's that?
What? Shakespeare.
Thank you.
I think it's from Hamlet. But what I do with the information is wholly up to me. I'm not saying social media is good or bad. I am saying
social media is there.
It exists. What I do with it,
it can be used for
yes. That can be for positive or negative, and that's wholly on me. And if I'm constantly searching out and seeking out things that I know are going to serve in some caustic way how I feel about things, then again, it's like I'm taking poison.
Yeah. my experience is what I choose to attend to.
Yes.
So yeah, your choices impact your day. You directly get a choice on a lot of these things.
Most of them.
Yeah.
And you don't get to blame anybody else for that.
Right. Well, and then it impacts how you look at the things you can't control. Because if I wake up and I'm doom scrolling the news or politics or whatever it is, and then I get outside and it's raining and dreary and cold and dark or whatever,
right,
I'm just going to keep that downward spiral. Like, oh, of course it's like this today.
Yeah.
Versus if I wake up starting positive, maybe I don't even notice it because I'm excited, I'm energized, I'm ready to go lift, or I'm ready to go get in a car and listen to my second Plan A podcast. That's also going to help put me in a better mood and keep my day going. But by controlling the things we can, we have a chance at controlling the things we can't, controlling in air quotes.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's most things are not in our control, but our response to those things is wholly in our control. And how we allow it to affect our day is wholly in our control. You know, if first thing in the morning I get a text that I ascribe a certain tonality to, that's on me. Instead of me just saying, maybe they didn't mean this in any certain way, or maybe I just ask them.
Yep.
You know?
Oh gosh.
Or maybe
talk to each other.
Yeah.
Terrible.
I mean, I'm not calling you.
Yeah, let's not go crazy.
It'll have to be in person.
Yeah.
No, it's, you know, and again, I don't want it to sound like I'm saying any of this stuff is easy. It's not. Simple.
But it is simple.
But not easy.
Well, it's theory versus putting it into practice. Yeah. I'm glad that you know that you're supposed to have your hands up. It's still going to take you months to actually make that happen.
Yeah.
And we had this conversation.
And probably getting punched in the face a few times.
A lot of times. We had this conversation last week with the person who came up to you a year into jiu-jitsu, and they thought that they could maybe start doing things in live rolling. Well, it's really hard to get to that point.
Yeah.
You should spend a lot of time tapping out and thinking, oh yeah, I did recognize they were setting that up and I definitely should have done this.
Yeah.
That's at least the first year, if not more.
At least, yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, that's our look at taking control of your consumption. If you didn't enjoy this podcast, that's probably on you. You probably should have framed your day better so that you'd have enjoyed it.
Yeah. You should have started with this.
Start your day with this so you can enjoy it and make your day better. But regardless, if you didn't enjoy it, you can still stay off of social media and go on with your life as usual. Or drop hate comments on all our stuff. Share it to your friends and tell them how terrible it is. That also works for us. If you did enjoy this discussion, though, please leave us 5-star reviews. Turn on your downloads on Spotify so you can have us anywhere you go. Follow, share, subscribe. Join the positive conversation on social media. Thanks for listening to Second Plan A, and we look forward to growing with you next time.
Thanks, everybody.